In the middle of the night, a worn-down father pushes his mop through the empty halls of a university until a split-second decision changes everything. One scribbled equation, and suddenly, he's standing in the center of a discovery that could change the world. But just as his life begins to turn around, a brutal truth hits. Powerful people want him gone, and they're coming for the one thing he loves most. Now, with the clock ticking, he must prove his worth, protect his child, and face enemies who will stop at nothing to tear it all away. If you had the answer to save millions, but the world refused to believe you, how far would you go to fight for it? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The marble floors of Hawthorne University's main lobby gleamed under the soft glow of evening lights. Ethan Cole, his weathered hands gripping the well-worn mop handle, made one final pass across the expansive surface. At 52, his movements were deliberate and practiced, each stroke ensuring no spot was missed. His reflection in the polished floor showed a man with salt and pepper hair and tired but kind eyes, dressed in the plain gray uniform of the university's maintenance staff. The empty lobby echoed with his quiet humming, an old lullaby he used to sing to Lily when she was small. These night shifts were lonely, but thoughts of his daughter always kept him company. He pictured her at home, probably surrounded by textbooks and notebooks, her dark curly hair falling across her face as she studied. Pride swelled in his chest, tempered by the constant worry about making ends meet. "Just 2 more wings to go," he muttered to himself, wheeling his cleaning cart toward the service elevator. The parent-teacher conference scheduled for next week weighed on his mind. He'd have to switch shifts with someone to attend, and those conversations were never easy. Most of his coworkers had families, too, all juggling their own complicated schedules. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding onto the physics floor. The hallway stretched before him, lined with closed doors and dimmed offices. Only a few lights remained on, creating pools of brightness in the otherwise shadowy corridor. The familiar scent of whiteboard markers and coffee lingered in the air. As he approached the main research lab, voices drifted through the partially open door. 2 young scientists, he recognized them as Dr. Chen and Dr. Rodriguez, were engaged in an animated discussion, their hands gesturing at a whiteboard covered in complex equations. "The growth rate can't be sustained in those conditions," Dr. Chen insisted, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We're missing something fundamental in the quantum stabilization sequence." Dr. Rodriguez shook her head, her lab coat swishing as she paced. "The theoretical framework is sound. We've been over this 100 times, but the practical application keeps failing." Ethan paused outside, not wanting to interrupt. He learned long ago that scientists preferred not to be disturbed when deep in thought. Through the years of cleaning these halls, he'd picked up bits and pieces of their discussions, finding an unexpected comfort in the familiar language of mathematics. It reminded him of evenings spent with Sarah, his late wife, as she explained her work, her eyes bright with passion for numbers and theory. "I need coffee," Dr. Rodriguez announced suddenly. "Real coffee, not this lab stuff. Want to grab some from the Night Owl?" "Yes, please," Dr. Chen replied, dropping his marker on the ledge. "Maybe a break will help us see what we're missing." They hurried past Ethan, offering brief, distracted nods of acknowledgement. He waited until their footsteps faded before entering the lab to empty the trash bins. But his eyes were drawn to the whiteboard, scanning the equations that covered its surface. The formula was elegant but flawed. He could see it clearly, the same mistake Sarah had pointed out years ago when working on a similar problem. The quantum stabilization sequence needed to account for environmental variables in a different way. The solution wasn't in forcing stability, but in working with natural fluctuations. Ethan set down his trash bag and moved closer to the board, his heart beating faster as he examined the equations. Memories of late-night discussions with Sarah flooded back, her patient explanations, the way she helped him understand complex concepts through practical examples. She had always believed in his ability to grasp these ideas, even when others dismissed him as just a maintenance worker. The marker felt foreign in his hand as he picked it up. He shouldn't interfere. It wasn't his place. He was here to clean, not to solve physics problems. But Sarah's voice echoed in his mind. "Knowledge doesn't care about titles or positions, Ethan. Truth is truth, no matter who speaks it." His hand hovered near the board, marker trembling slightly. Years of doubt and self-consciousness weighed against the certainty of what he saw in those equations. The solution was there, just waiting to be written. Glancing over his shoulder at the empty doorway, Ethan took a deep breath. Then, with careful precision, he began to write. Note: stopped here as per instructions, reaching the exact ending point specified without going further or foreshadowing. The dim lighting in the physics wing cast long shadows across the empty hallway as Ethan pushed his cart toward the research labs. Most offices were dark at this hour, except for Lab 7, where a whiteboard covered in equations glowed under fluorescent lights. The familiar scent of coffee lingered in the air, mixed with the sharp tang of dry erase markers. Ethan entered the lab, his eyes drawn to the complex mathematical formulas sprawled across the whiteboard. Numbers, variables, and Greek symbols danced before him in a language that felt like coming home. His hands automatically reached for the trash bin, but his mind was elsewhere, analyzing the equations that dominated the wall. A small smile tugged at his lips as memories flooded back. Evenings spent at the kitchen table with Sarah, her eyes bright with enthusiasm as she explained advanced calculus concepts. Math is just another way of describing the world, she'd say, dark curls bouncing as she gestured animatedly. It's everywhere, in everything. His gaze caught on a particular section of the equation. There was something off about it, something that didn't quite align with what Sarah had taught him about optimization algorithms. The error was subtle, but it nagged at him like a splinter under skin. Before he could stop himself, Ethan's hand reached for the black dry erase marker left on the metal tray. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight, so different from his mop, yet somehow familiar. The plastic was still warm from its last use. Sarah would have spotted this right away, he whispered to himself, uncapping the marker. Its chemical smell mixed with the lingering coffee aroma as he began writing. His hand moved with surprising confidence, muscle memory from countless study sessions guiding his strokes. He added a variable that the original equation had missed, his writing neat and precise despite years away from academia. The marker squeaked against the smooth surface as he worked, breaking the late-night silence. Numbers and symbols flowed from his mind through his fingers, drawing from lessons learned at Sarah's side. She had been particularly passionate about optimization problems, especially those involving growth patterns in nature. Everything seeks the most efficient path, she'd explained once, using a sunflower's spiral pattern as an example. Ethan paused, studying what he'd written so far. The equation needed something more, something to account for crop yield optimization. Sarah had shown him similar problems when she'd consulted on agricultural projects. He added another term, connecting it to the existing formula with careful mathematical logic. The work absorbed him completely. For a few precious minutes, he wasn't Ethan Cole the janitor, but simply a man doing what he loved, working with the elegant language of mathematics. His wedding ring caught the fluorescent light as he wrote, a quiet reminder of the woman who had opened this world to him. He stepped back, surveying his additions. The modified equation looked right, balanced, complete. It spoke of efficiency and growth, of plants thriving in conditions where they shouldn't. Simple yet powerful, like all good mathematics. The sound of approaching footsteps and animated voices broke through his concentration. Ethan blinked, suddenly aware of where he was and what he'd done. He was still holding the marker, standing before a whiteboard he had no business touching. The two young scientists from earlier rounded the corner, paper coffee cups in hand, mid-conversation, their voices cut off abruptly as they entered the lab. Both froze mid-step, their eyes locked on the whiteboard where Ethan's additions stood out in crisp black ink. The shorter scientist's coffee cup tilted dangerously in his slack grip, while his colleague's mouth hung slightly open. Neither spoke, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief as they stared at what he'd written. The two scientists stood frozen in the doorway, their paper coffee cups suspended mid-air. The shorter one, wearing thick-rimmed glasses and a wrinkled lab coat, blinked rapidly at the whiteboard. The taller scientist, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, took a step forward, mouth slightly open. Ethan's stomach dropped. The mop handle felt suddenly slick in his palm. He shouldn't have touched their work. What was he thinking? He'd crossed a line. "I'm sorry," he stammered, backing away from the board. "I shouldn't have." How? The woman interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. How did you know this? She pointed at the modified equation, her finger trembling slightly. This connection here, it's brilliant. We've been stuck on this for months. Heat crept up Ethan's neck. He focused on adjusting his name tag, avoiding their intense stares. I just remember things sometimes, mathematical patterns. It's nothing, really. The man with the glasses stepped closer, coffee forgotten on a nearby desk. Nothing? Sir, this is extraordinary. You've connected quantum field theory to crop yield optimization in a way we never considered. He turned to his colleague. Sarah, look at how he's incorporated the moisture retention variable. Sarah nodded vigorously, her eyes bright with excitement. And the soil composition matrix, it's so elegant? She whirled toward Ethan. Are you from another department? I don't recognize you from our faculty meetings. Ethan gripped his mop tighter, suddenly very aware of his gray custodial uniform. No, I clean the buildings at night. The words felt heavy in his mouth, like admitting to a crime. The two scientists exchanged glances. The man stuck out his hand. I'm Dr. David Chen, and this is Dr. Sarah Martinez. We're working on developing methods to grow crops in extreme conditions. Ethan carefully wiped his palm on his uniform before shaking David's hand. Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, Sarah said, her voice warm and curious. Would you join us for coffee? The campus cafe is still open, and we'd love to hear more about your thought process. Oh, I couldn't possibly. Ethan glanced at his cart full of cleaning supplies. Please, David insisted. Just 15 minutes. This could be important. The sincerity in their faces made Ethan's chest tighten. When was the last time anyone had asked about his thoughts on anything more complex than floor wax? Let me put away my equipment. 10 minutes later, Ethan found himself seated at a small table in the nearly empty campus cafe. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as Ethan stepped into Lab 7B of the quantum physics wing. His work cart and cleaning supplies were safely stored in the janitor's closet down the hall. He'd finished his evening rounds early, just for this meeting. The familiar scent of industrial cleaner on his hands clashed with the sterile laboratory air. The room itself took his breath away. Sleek machines lined the walls, their displays glowing with complex data streams. Glass cases housed what looked like experimental plant specimens, each bathed in different colored lights. The center of the lab featured a massive clear chamber connected to various monitoring devices. Dr. Sarah Chen, the scientist with the messy bun from last night, waved him over to a workstation. Mr. Cole, thank you for coming. Her colleague, Dr. James Murray, pulled up an extra chair. Please, call me Ethan, he said, settling into the seat. His work boots felt out of place next to their pristine lab coats. This is quite something. He gestured at the equipment surrounding them. This is where we're trying to change the world, Dr. Chen said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. She tapped a few keys on her computer, bringing up a series of images. What do you know about quantum agriculture? Ethan leaned forward, studying the screen. Only what I've read. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten as Ethan's old pickup truck rattled into the driveway of their modest two-bedroom house. The porch light was on, and through the kitchen window, he could see movement. Lily was already up. His heart felt lighter than it had in years, despite his exhaustion from the night shift. The screen door creaked as he entered, and the warm smell of scrambled eggs and toast wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. Lily stood at the stove, still in her purple pajamas with the little stars on them, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had her mother's graceful way of moving, even when doing something as simple as cooking breakfast. You're home late, she said without turning around, sliding the eggs onto 2 plates. I was getting worried. Sorry, sweetheart, something happened at work. Ethan set his lunchbox down on the counter and shrugged off his worn jacket. Lily turned, spatula in hand, her eyebrows raised. Did Mrs. Henderson complain about the floors again? That woman needs to get a hobby besides inspecting everyone's work. Ethan couldn't help but smile. No, nothing like that, actually. He paused, suddenly feeling uncertain about how to explain it all. Remember how Mom used to teach me mathematics while she was working on her thesis? Lily's expression softened at the mention of her mother. She set the spatula down and brought the plates to their small kitchen table. Of course. You said she'd explain complex theories while you helped her organize her research papers. She pulled out a chair. What about it? Ethan sat down, his uniform still smelling of cleaning products and floor wax. Well, last night I was cleaning the physics wing, and there were these scientists working on a problem. They left their equations on the whiteboard, and I saw something they'd missed. Lily's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. You mean like how Mom would show you the mistakes in her students' work? Exactly like that. Ethan took a bite of toast, realizing how hungry he was after the long night. They came back and found me correcting their formula. Instead of being angry, they invited me to their lab tonight. Well, technically last night now. Dad! Lily's eyes widened. That's amazing! What kind of research are they doing? Ethan leaned forward, his own excitement building as he explained about quantum agriculture and the possibility of growing crops in hostile environments. They've offered me a part-time consulting position. It would mean keeping my regular job, but spending some extra hours in the lab. Extra hours? Lily's forehead creased with concern. But you're already working so hard. This would be different, Ethan said softly. This would be using my mind, not just my hands, like I used to, with your mother. Lily was quiet for a moment, pushing her eggs around her plate. Then she looked up, and Ethan saw tears shining in her eyes. Dad, I haven't seen you this excited about anything since Mom died. The words hit him like a physical force. He hadn't realized how obvious it had been to her, how much he'd dimmed over the years. I guess I haven't had much to be excited about, except for you. That's not true, Lily protested. You're always telling me to follow my dreams, to never settle. But what about your dreams, Dad? I remember when I was little, you and Mom would sit at this very table, surrounded by papers covered in equations. Your eyes would light up just like they are now. Ethan swallowed hard. Your mother was the real genius. I was just lucky enough to learn from her. Stop that. Lily's voice was firm. Mom always said you had a natural talent for seeing patterns others missed. She said you could have been a brilliant engineer if you hadn't. She trailed off. If I hadn't dropped out to take care of her when she got sick, Ethan finished quietly. She never wanted you to give up on yourself, Dad. Neither do I. Lily stood up and walked around the table. You've spent the last 5 years making sure I had everything I needed, working a job that most people look down on, never complaining. It's honest work, Ethan said, but his voice wavered slightly. Nothing wrong with being a janitor. No, there isn't, Lily agreed, wrapping her arms around his shoulders from behind. But you're more than that. You always have been. She squeezed him tighter, and he felt her tears dampen his shirt. You're more than a janitor, Dad. Ethan reached up and held onto his daughter's arms, feeling the weight of years of quiet sacrifice and hidden dreams in her embrace. The morning sun was streaming through their kitchen window now, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor, but bringing with it the promise of something new. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the physics building, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Ethan sat at a desk in Lab 7, hunched over pages of calculations. His janitorial cart stood in the hallway, a reminder of the job he still needed to complete once evening came. But for now, his mind was lost in numbers and possibilities. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the young scientists who had discovered his whiteboard correction, stood nearby, pointing to a computer simulation of crop growth patterns. Her enthusiasm was contagious as she explained how his formula had opened new avenues of research. See here? She gestured at the screen. Your variable accounts for soil mineralization in a way we hadn't considered. It's brilliant in its simplicity. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, still uncomfortable with praise. My wife used to say the best solutions are usually the simplest ones. She taught me to look for patterns in unexpected places. The lab door swung open, and conversation in the room died. Professor Theodore Randall strode in, his silk tie perfectly knotted despite the late afternoon hour. His steel-gray hair was expertly styled, and his wire-rimmed glasses sat precisely on his nose. Everything about him screamed authority and academic prestige. Ethan's stomach clenched. 20 years had passed, but he'd never forgotten that face. the same face that had once looked down at him from behind a massive oak desk and suggested he consider a more suitable career path, perhaps in maintenance. Professor Randall's eyes swept the room, landing on Ethan. Recognition flickered across his features, followed by a slight curl of his lip. "Dr. Chen," he said, deliberately turning away from Ethan. "A moment of your time." Sarah glanced uncertainly between them. "Of course, Professor Randall. Ethan, would you excuse us?" Ethan nodded, pretending to focus on his calculations. But the numbers blurred as voices carried from the hallway, just outside the door left slightly ajar. "I understand you've brought on some additional help." Randall's voice oozed with carefully measured disdain. "Yes, Mr. Cole has provided valuable insights into our quantum agriculture project. His understanding of complex mathematical modeling is remarkable." "Sarah," Randall's tone turned patronizing. "I knew this man 20 years ago when he was a student here. He dropped out in his second year. Now he pushes a mop around our halls. But his work is probably copied from somewhere, or a lucky guess. Do you really want to risk the department's reputation by allowing some janitor to play genius in your lab?" Ethan's hands curled into fists beneath the desk, his knuckles white with tension. The familiar shame he'd carried for years threatened to rise up and choke him. "With all due respect, Professor," Sarah's voice grew firmer, "the work speaks for itself. We've verified his calculations independently." "Has it occurred to you that he might have stolen these ideas? Perhaps from papers he's found while emptying trash bins?" Randall's words dripped with contempt. "This institution maintains certain standards. We can't have every maintenance worker who remembers some basic algebra thinking they can contribute to serious research." Blood pounded in Ethan's ears. He thought of Lily's face that morning, beaming with pride when he told her about the lab work. He thought of Maria, his late wife, who had believed in him even when he'd stopped believing in himself. "I strongly suggest you reconsider this arrangement," Randall continued. "Find a proper research assistant, someone with credentials, someone who belongs here." Ethan's jaw clenched so tight it hurt. 20 years ago, he would have walked away, head down, accepting Randall's judgment. But now, there was more at stake than his pride. There was Lily's future, Maria's memory, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to make a real difference in the world. Still, he remained silent, letting his fists slowly unclench beneath the desk. He wouldn't give Randall the satisfaction of a response. Instead, he forced his attention back to the calculations before him, each number a quiet act of defiance. Through the gap in the door, he could see Randall's perfectly polished shoes turn and walk away, their sharp clicks echoing down the hallway like small explosions of authority. Sarah's comfortable sneakers remained still for a moment before returning to the lab. She paused in the doorway, her face a mix of embarrassment and concern. Ethan kept his eyes on his work, pretending he hadn't heard every word. The sun had shifted, and the shadows in the room had grown longer, but he continued writing, each equation a step forward on a path he'd thought forever closed to him. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the lab windows as Ethan studied the complex equations before him. His weathered hands, usually gripping a mop or duster, now held a mechanical pencil as he sketched calculations in a notebook. The familiar scent of cleaning supplies from his cart in the hallway mixed with the sterile laboratory air. Dr. Mei Chen watched him from her office doorway, a thoughtful expression on her face. She had been observing him work for the past hour, noting his methodical approach and careful attention to detail. His shoulders were slightly hunched, as if he was trying to make himself smaller in this unfamiliar space. "Ethan?" Dr. Chen's gentle voice broke through his concentration. "Do you have a moment?" He looked up, quickly setting down his pencil. "Of course, Dr. Chen." He started to rise, but she waved him back down. "Please stay seated." She pulled up a chair beside him, her lab coat rustling as she sat. Her dark eyes were kind but serious. "I've been reviewing your work from the past few days. Your insights are remarkable." Ethan's cheeks flushed slightly. "Thank you, but I'm just remembering things my wife taught me. She was the real genius." "You're too modest." Dr. Chen laid a thick folder on the desk between them. "This is our current grant proposal for the Quantum Agriculture Initiative. We've been working on it for months, but something's missing. The Foundation wants innovation, breakthrough thinking. She paused, studying his face. The kind of thinking you've shown us this week. Ethan's eyes widened as he understood what she was suggesting. Dr. Chen, I'm not qualified, I'm just… A janitor? She finished, raising an eyebrow. Is that what Professor Randall would say? Ethan flinched at the mention of Randall's name, remembering the professor's earlier dismissal of him. Dr. Chen noticed and leaned forward. Listen to me, Ethan. I don't care about titles or credentials. I care about results. And you. She tapped the equations he'd been working on. You see connections others miss. You understand the practical applications in ways we theorists sometimes overlook. She opened the folder, revealing pages of research data and preliminary findings. The grant submission is due in 1 week. We need your help to refine our proposal, to make it stronger. Your perspective could be exactly what we need to secure this funding. Ethan stared at the papers, his heart racing. The equations and diagrams called to him like an old friend, but doubt crept in like a shadow. What if I make a mistake? What if I let everyone down? Dr. Chen's voice softened. Did you know I was a dishwasher when I first came to this country? Some people said I didn't belong in academia. But here I am, leading this lab. She smiled warmly. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from unexpected places. Ethan ran his fingers along the edge of the papers, remembering nights spent studying with his wife, Sarah. How her eyes would light up when they solved a particularly challenging problem together. He could almost hear her voice. Math doesn't care who solves it, love. It only cares about truth. The grant, he said slowly. What would it mean for the project? 5 years of guaranteed funding, Dr. Chen replied. Enough to potentially revolutionize desert farming. Think about it. Helping crops grow in places where nothing grows now. Feeding people who struggle to feed themselves. The weight of the opportunity settled on Ethan's shoulders. He thought of Lily, how proud she'd been when he told her about the consulting work. He thought of Sarah, who had always believed in him, even when he stopped believing in himself. It won't be easy, Dr. Chen continued. We'll need to work late hours. You'll have to balance this with your regular duties, and I know you have responsibilities at home. Ethan nodded, thinking of his daughter studying alone at night. I can adjust my cleaning schedule. Lily understands when something's important. Dr. Chen straightened in her chair. So, is that a yes? Ethan looked at the equations he'd been working on, then at the grant proposal. His stomach churned with anxiety, but underneath it was something else, a spark of excitement he hadn't felt in years. Yes, he said quietly, then more firmly. Yes, I'll help. Dr. Chen broke into a wide smile. Excellent, we'll start tonight. I'll have the team gather their latest data. As she stood to leave, Ethan felt the familiar wave of self-doubt wash over him. Here he was, a night janitor, about to help write a major scientific grant proposal. Professor Randall's words echoed in his mind. Some janitor playing genius. But he pushed the thought away, focusing instead on the numbers before him. They didn't care who he was or what job he held. They only cared about being solved, about being understood. And that at least was something he knew he could do. Dr. Chen paused at the door. Ethan, thank you for taking this chance. He nodded, already turning back to the calculations, his pencil moving with renewed purpose across the page, even as uncertainty gnawed at the edges of his determination. The fluorescent lights hummed steadily overhead as Ethan worked at a small desk tucked into the corner of the lab. Stacks of research papers and notebooks surrounded him, each filled with his careful notes and calculations. His old thermos of coffee sat nearby, half empty and long since gone cold. 3 days of intense work had left him tired but energized. The grant proposal was coming together better than he'd hoped. His mind felt alive again, swimming with formulas and possibilities he hadn't touched since his wife's passing. Even the late hours felt worth it. He'd adjusted his janitorial schedule to work on the proposal during the quiet afternoon hours when Lily was at school. Dr. Chen had given him access to a university email account and a temporary ID badge. It felt strange, walking the halls as something other than maintenance staff. Some professors nodded hello now, while others still looked through him like he was invisible. Ethan didn't mind either way. He was focused on the work, on proving himself through results rather than recognition. He was double-checking a particularly complex calculation when his cell phone buzzed in his pocket. The number wasn't familiar, but the area code was local. Probably another bill collector, he thought, but answered anyway. "Mr. Cole?" a crisp, professional voice asked. "This is Margaret Webster from Child Protective Services." Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. His throat went dry. "Yes?" "I'm calling to inform you that we've received a petition for custody evaluation regarding your daughter, Lily Cole." The fluorescent lights suddenly seemed too bright, too harsh. The room tilted slightly as Ethan gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. "I'm sorry, what?" "The petition has been filed by Mr. and Mrs. Richard Harrison. They've identified themselves as Lily's maternal grandparents." The Harrisons. Of course. The same people who'd cut off all contact when he'd married their daughter, who'd refused to even attend the wedding because they couldn't accept their daughter marrying outside their race, who'd only tried reaching out after Sarah got sick, when it was already too late. "They have no right," Ethan said, his voice hoarse. "They haven't been in Lily's life for years. They chose not to be." "Nevertheless, they've raised concerns about Lily's living situation that we're required to investigate." Papers shuffled on the other end of the line. "They cite your irregular work hours, income level, and lack of consistent adult supervision during your night shifts as primary concerns." Each word felt like a physical blow. Ethan closed his eyes, seeing all the sacrifices he'd made to keep their little family afloat. The endless night shifts, the careful budgeting, the way he'd arranged his schedule to always be there when Lily needed him most. "Mr. Cole, are you still there?" "Yes." He forced the word out. "What? What happens now?" "We'll need to schedule a home evaluation within the next 2 weeks. We'll also need to review your employment history, income statements, and Lily's school records." The Harrisons have already submitted character references and proof of financial stability. Of course they had. Richard Harrison was a retired bank executive. They lived in a gated community, played golf, went on cruises. Everything Ethan couldn't give Lily. "I have all my documentation," Ethan said quietly. "Lily's grades are excellent. She's never missed a day of school. We have a routine that works." "I understand, Mr. Cole, but we're required to investigate all claims thoroughly. You'll receive official notification in the mail, but I wanted to give you advance notice. Do you have any questions?" 1,000 questions burned in his throat. How could they do this? Why now? What right did they have to judge him? But he kept his voice steady, professional. "No. Thank you for letting me know." "Very well. Have a good afternoon, Mr. Cole." The call ended. Ethan sat motionless, staring at the phone in his hand. The lab's familiar sounds, the whir of computers, the soft beeping of equipment, seemed distant, unreal. His eyes drifted to the grant proposal draft on his desk, the careful equations that had felt so important just minutes ago. Through the lab's windows, he could see his cleaning cart waiting in the hallway. The mop handle leaned against the bucket at its familiar angle, the blue cleaning cloths neatly folded on the bottom shelf. Such a simple thing, that cart. Such an honest way to make a living. He'd never been ashamed of it before. Tired sometimes, yes, but never ashamed. He'd always told Lily that any honest work was worthy of respect. But now those simple tools seemed to mock him. Just a janitor. The words echoed in his head, not in Professor Randall's voice this time, but in Richard Harrison's smooth, confident tone. Just a janitor trying to play scientist, a man who couldn't even provide his daughter with a normal life, with regular hours, with the stability she deserved. The grant proposal suddenly felt like a fantasy, a desperate reach for something beyond his grasp. How could he focus on quantum agriculture when he might lose the one thing that mattered most? His eyes burned as he stared at the mop bucket, its familiar blue plastic now blurring at the edges. The downtown legal aid office occupied a cramped corner of an aging brick building. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in a hard plastic chair, his work uniform traded for his one good suit, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral. The fabric felt tight across his shoulders now, a reminder of how long it had hung unworn in his closet. Martha Chen, the pro bono attorney assigned to his case, spread several documents across her desk. Despite her young age, she carried herself with quiet confidence. Her desk nameplate revealed she was a recent graduate of Hawthorne University's law school, the same halls Ethan cleaned every night. "Let me be direct, Mr. Cole," she said, adjusting her reading glasses. "Custody cases are complicated, and grandparents' rights cases even more so. The Harrisons have significant resources at their disposal." Ethan nodded, his throat tight. "I understand, but they haven't been in Lily's life for years. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," Martha agreed, making a note on her legal pad. "But they'll argue that was your choice, not theirs." "They'll paint themselves as concerned grandparents trying to reconnect with their only grandchild." She pulled out a form filled with neat typing. According to their petition, they're citing several concerns. Your night shift work schedule, claiming Lily lacks proper supervision. Your income level, suggesting financial instability. And, she hesitated, frowning at the paper. And what? They're questioning your recent involvement with the university research lab, suggesting it shows instability in your employment choices and takes time away from parenting duties. Ethan's hands clenched in his lap. Of course they'd found out about that. The lab work is part-time, around my regular schedule. Lily's proud of it. She's the one who encouraged me to accept the position. Martha smiled slightly. "That's good. Lily's opinion will matter to the judge, especially at her age. Now, let's talk timeline. The initial hearing is set for 2 weeks from today. We need to prepare documentation proving your stability and adequate income." She pulled out a checklist. "We'll need Lily's school records, your employment history, bank statements, rent receipts, utility bills, anything showing consistent payment and responsible financial management. Also, character references from people who can speak to your parenting abilities." 2 weeks isn't much time," Ethan said quietly. "No, it isn't. But Mr. Cole." Martha leaned forward, her expression earnest. "You have advantages here. You're Lily's primary caregiver, and have been since her mother's death. You've maintained steady employment. Lily's doing well in school. These are all points in your favor." She started organizing the papers into neat piles. "The Harrisons may have money and social connections, but courts don't award custody based on who has the bigger house. They look at the child's best interests, stability, emotional bonds, continuation of established relationships." Ethan thought of Lily's room at home, walls covered with her artwork and science fair ribbons. The kitchen table where they did homework together. The small garden they'd planted in memory of Sarah. Their life wasn't luxurious, but it was filled with love. "What do you need from me first?" he asked. Martha handed him a thick folder. "Start gathering these documents. I've included a detailed list. We'll need everything organized before the hearing." She checked her calendar. "Can you meet again in 3 days? That gives you time to collect records and lets us review everything before court." "Yes, I'll have it all ready." "Good." She stood and extended her hand. "Mr. Cole, I know this is overwhelming, but from what I've seen so far, you're exactly the kind of parent courts want to support, dedicated, stable, involved in your child's life. We're going to fight this." Ethan shook her hand, grateful for her confidence, even if he couldn't fully share it. "Thank you, Miss Chen. One more thing," she added as he reached the door. "Document everything from now on. Every interaction with the Harrisons, every school event you attend, every parent, teacher, conference. Details matter in custody cases." Ethan nodded and stepped into the hallway. His watch showed 2:30 p.m., just enough time to get to the lab for his scheduled work on the grant proposal. The courthouse's marble floors gleamed beneath his feet as he walked toward the exit, his reflection distorted in the polished stone. The sunlight outside felt harsh after the building's dim interior. Ethan loosened his tie, already thinking about changing back into his work clothes at the university. He was exhausted. The meeting had drained him more than a full night of cleaning, but the grant deadline wouldn't wait. Neither would the bills, or Lily's upcoming school expenses, or any of the other responsibilities that kept pushing him forward. He reached his old car. The paint faded from years of sun exposure. The folder from Martha Chen sat heavy in his hands, full of tasks to complete and documents to gather. But as tired as he was, determination slowly replaced his fatigue. He'd fought to build a life for Lily after Sarah died, worked countless nights to keep their small family afloat. He wasn't about to let anyone take that away. Not the Harrisons, not their expensive lawyers, not anyone. Sliding behind the wheel, Ethan pointed the car toward Hawthorne University. The lab waited, with its complex equations and brilliant minds. It wasn't just an escape anymore. It was another way to prove he could provide for his daughter, another weapon in the fight to keep their family together. He merged into traffic, the afternoon sun at his back, heading toward the next battle in what was becoming the most important war of his life. The harsh, fluorescent lights of Hawthorne University's hallways cast long shadows as Ethan pushed his cleaning cart past midnight. His movements were mechanical now. Mop, sweep, empty bins, while his mind raced through legal terms and quantum equations. The routine that had once brought him peace now felt like walking through thick fog. He checked his watch. 2:15 a.m. In less than 6 hours, he'd need to meet with Martha Chen again to review more custody paperwork. Then, straight to the lab by afternoon, where Dr. Chen and the team waited for his input on the grant proposal. Somewhere in between, he needed to squeeze in a few hours of sleep. The sound of his phone vibrating made him jump. A text from Lily. "Can't sleep. Math test tomorrow." Ethan's heart ached. He knew she wasn't really studying. She was waiting up for him again, worried. He texted back, "Try to rest, sweetheart. I'll be home soon." The next day blurred into the previous one. Ethan sat in Martha's office, stifling yawns as she explained their strategy. "The Harrisons' main argument is your work schedule," she said, shuffling through papers. "They claim your night shifts mean inadequate supervision." "I've always been there when Lily needs me," Ethan protested, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "I know," Martha's eyes softened. "But we need to show the judge more than that. We need documented stability." By afternoon, Ethan was in the research lab, staring at complex formulas while trying to keep his eyes focused. The numbers swam before him, but he forced himself to concentrate. This grant could change everything. Better pay, regular hours, a chance to prove himself worthy of keeping his daughter. "Ethan?" Dr. Chen's voice cut through his exhaustion. "Maybe you should take a break." He shook his head. "I'm fine. Just need to finish this section." His phone buzzed again, this time from Lily's school. His stomach dropped as he answered. "Mr. Cole?" It was Lily's history teacher. "Lily fell asleep in class again today. Given her usual academic performance, I'm concerned." That evening, Ethan found Lily at her desk. Textbooks spread around her, dark circles under her eyes matching his own. She was fighting to keep her head up, pencil moving sluggishly across her notebook. "Hey, kiddo," he said softly, touching her shoulder. "Time for bed." "Can't," she mumbled. "Need to finish this chapter. Need good grades. For the case." The words hit him like a physical blow. His brilliant, beautiful daughter was running herself into the ground, trying to help him fight this battle. He gently took the pencil from her hand. "Come on," he said, helping her up. "School night." She didn't protest as he guided her to her room, a sign of how truly exhausted she was. As she changed into pajamas, he noticed the photo on her nightstand. Lily and Sarah at the beach, both laughing at something long forgotten. His wife's smile seemed to pierce through time, asking him to take care of their little girl. Lily crawled into bed, her movements heavy with fatigue. "What if they take me away, Dad?" Ethan sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her dark hair back from her forehead, just like Sarah used to do. "That's not going to happen." "But the grandparents, they have all that money and lawyers and—" "Listen to me," Ethan said firmly, taking her hand. "Those things don't matter as much as love, as much as family. You and me, we're a team, remember?" Lily nodded slowly, her eyes already starting to close, despite her worry. "I know things are hard right now," he continued, pulling her blanket up. "But you don't have to carry this weight. Let me handle the grown-up stuff. Your job is to be 16, to learn, to rest when you need to." "But I want to help," she murmured, fighting sleep. "You help by being you," Ethan said softly. "By being the amazing person your mom and I always knew you'd become." He watched as her breathing steadied, remembering all the nights he'd sat just like this, watching over her, when she was tiny and sick with fever, when thunderstorms scared her. When Sarah first got sick, and Lily would pretend to sleep while actually waiting to make sure he came home from the hospital. Lily's face relaxed in sleep, looking younger than her 16 years. Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead, his voice barely a whisper but filled with fierce determination. "I'm not going to lose you." The morning sun streamed through the lab's tall windows, casting long rectangles of light across the polished steel tables. Ethan stood at a whiteboard, carefully writing out a series of calculations that might help optimize water absorption rates in drought-resistant crops. His handwriting was neat and precise, a habit from years of studying alongside Sarah, his late wife, who had always insisted that clear writing led to clear thinking. Behind him, the lab hummed with its usual morning activity. Graduate students shuffled between workstations, the coffee maker gurgled in the corner, and computer fans whirred steadily. It was a peaceful rhythm he'd grown to appreciate during his consulting hours. "That's not your work to present," the sharp voice cut through the quiet like a knife. Ethan turned to find Marcus Chen, no relation to Dr. Mei Chen, glaring at him from the doorway. The young scientist's face was flushed, his laptop clutched tightly against his chest. "I'm sorry." Ethan lowered his marker, keeping his voice calm despite the sudden tension in his shoulders. "Those calculations." Marcus stepped into the room, gesturing at the whiteboard. "They're based on Dr. Peterson's original research. You can't just walk in here and start claiming credit for years of other people's work." A few nearby students stopped what they were doing, turning to watch. Ethan felt their eyes on him, heavy with curiosity and judgment. He thought of Lily, who'd been so proud when he told her about the consulting position. What would she think if she could see him now? "I'm not claiming anything," Ethan said quietly. "I'm just trying to help solve a problem." "Help?" Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "You're a janitor who got lucky with one equation. Some of us spent years earning our degrees, working our way up. We don't need—" "That's enough." Dr. Mei Chen's voice rang out from the doorway. She stood there, lab coat crisp and white, her expression stern but controlled. "Marcus, my office, now!" Marcus's face reddened further, but he followed Dr. Chen out of the lab. The remaining students quickly found reasons to look busy, though Ethan could still feel sideways glances thrown his way. He turned back to the whiteboard, trying to focus on the numbers, but the equations swam before his eyes. His hand trembled slightly as he set the marker down. 10 minutes later, Dr. Chen returned. She walked over to Ethan's workstation, her steps measured and deliberate. "I apologize for Marcus's behavior," she said, keeping her voice low. "It was unprofessional and unnecessary." Ethan nodded, unable to find words for a moment. Finally, he managed, "Thank you for stepping in." "Don't thank me yet," Dr. Chen sighed, removing her glasses to clean them with the edge of her lab coat. "Marcus isn't the only one who feels this way. There's tension building in the department. Some people think your involvement might jeopardize the grant proposal's credibility." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He thought of the custody battle looming ahead, how much he needed this opportunity to prove he could provide for Lily. "Should I step back from the project?" Dr. Chen put her glasses back on, fixing him with a steady gaze. "Absolutely not. Your contributions are valuable, and your insights are exactly what this team needs." "But—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You should know what you're facing. Academic politics can be—" She shook her head. "Well, let's just say cleaning floors is sometimes more straightforward than navigating department politics." Ethan looked down at his hands, callous from years of manual labor, but still capable of writing complex equations. He thought of Sarah, how she'd always told him that true worth wasn't in titles or degrees, but in what you could contribute to the world. "I understand," he said, finally, looking back up at Dr. Chen. "I'll keep my head down and focus on the work. Let the results speak for themselves." Dr. Chen nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "That's wise. Just remember, you have allies here too. Don't let anyone make you feel less than what you are." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Ethan, those calculations you were working on? They're solid. Keep going." After she left, Ethan picked up the marker again. The lab had settled back into its normal rhythm, but something had shifted. He felt both more uncertain and more determined than before. The equations still needed solving, regardless of who thought he belonged here or not. Taking a deep breath, he began to write again, one number at a time, one problem at a time. Just like Sarah had taught him. Just like he'd always done. Let them watch, he thought. Let them doubt. The work would speak for itself. The marker moved steadily across the whiteboard, leaving a trail of precise numbers and symbols in its wake. And if his hand shook slightly less than before, well, that was progress too. The tension from Marcus's outburst still lingered in the air as Ethan sat at his workstation later that afternoon, surrounded by stacks of research papers and a well-worn notebook. His fingers flew across the keyboard, inputting variables into the simulation software. The familiar smell of coffee and cleaning supplies mingled in the air. He hadn't had time to change out of his janitor's uniform before coming to the lab. Numbers and formulas danced across his screen, reminding him of late nights studying with Sarah. She'd always said math was like music. You just had to find the right rhythm. Right now, something in the current model wasn't quite in tune. "There's a pattern here," he muttered, tapping his pencil against the desk. The crop yield predictions were good, but not great. Something was missing. He closed his eyes, remembering Sarah's voice. "Sometimes you have to look at it sideways, love. Change your perspective." His eyes snapped open. "The soil composition ratios," he said, a bit louder than he meant to. Dr. Chen looked up from her desk across the room. "What was that, Ethan?" He stood up, excitement making him forget his usual reserved manner. "We've been treating soil composition as a constant, but what if it's more like a symphony?" He walked to the whiteboard, marker in hand. Each component, nitrogen, phosphorus, moisture levels, they don't just exist side by side. They dance together. His hand moved quickly across the board, writing out a new series of equations. "If we adjust the ratios dynamically based on growth stages..." He paused, double-checking his math. The plants could essentially customize their own growing conditions. Dr. Chen had moved closer, her eyes widening as she followed his calculations. This could work. She turned to her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Let me run it through the simulator." Other team members gathered around, the earlier hostility forgotten in the face of potential discovery. Even Marcus edged closer, trying to maintain his skeptical expression but clearly intrigued. The simulation loaded agonizingly slowly. Ethan's heart pounded as the first results appeared on the screen. Then more data points populated the graph, forming a curve that shot upward far beyond their previous best projections. "Holy cow!" whispered one of the graduate students. Dr. Chen adjusted her glasses, leaning closer to the screen. "These numbers. They're showing a potential yield increase of 47% over our previous best model." She turned to Ethan, her face bright with excitement. "And the water consumption is actually lower." The team huddled around the computer, pointing out different aspects of the results. Someone pulled up a 3D visualization showing how the enhanced crops would theoretically grow in various soil conditions. The holographic display painted the lab in shades of green and gold. "Run it again," Marcus said suddenly, his voice tight but not hostile. "Different conditions this time. Desert environment, minimal water input." They did. The results were even better. "Tropical conditions?" suggested another student. Again and again, they tested the model. Each time, the crops in the simulation thrived, adapting to their environments in ways they hadn't thought possible before. "This could change everything," Dr. Chen said softly. "Ethan, this isn't just an improvement. This is a breakthrough." He felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the lab's temperature. For a moment, he could almost feel Sarah's hand on his shoulder, hear her proud laugh. "I think this calls for a celebration," Dr. Chen announced. She pulled out her phone. "Lucky Garden is still open. Who's in for Chinese?" 20 minutes later, the lab tables were covered with containers of lo mein, kung pao chicken, and vegetable fried rice. The smell of soy sauce and ginger replaced the usual laboratory scents. Paper plates and plastic forks were distributed, and someone found a stack of napkins in a drawer. Ethan sat quietly at the edge of the group, watching as the team chatted and laughed, passing containers back and forth. It reminded him of late-night study sessions in college, before life had taken its unexpected turns. "Here," Dr. Chen said, holding out a plate of dumplings. "You haven't eaten anything yet." He accepted the plate with a murmured thanks. Around him, the conversation flowed freely, all traces of earlier tension gone. One of the graduate students was explaining the potential applications of their breakthrough to her colleague, gesturing enthusiastically with her chopsticks. Another was already sketching out plans for the next phase of testing. Marcus approached, holding 2 cans of soda. He held one out to Ethan. "I, noticed you like the orange kind," he said awkwardly. "From the break room." Ethan accepted the peace offering with a nod. "Thank you." The younger scientist shifted his weight. "Your model. It's really something. I've never seen anything like it." "Neither have I," Ethan replied honestly. "Sometimes you just have to look at things differently." A comfortable silence settled between them as they ate. Across the room, someone had pulled up pictures of actual test gardens on the big screen, and the team was discussing where they might implement the new growing techniques first. Ethan took another bite of his dumpling, allowing himself a small smile. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The equation had worked not because he was trying to prove anything, but because he was simply doing what he loved, solving puzzles, making things work better. He thought of Lily, how excited she would be to hear about this. Despite everything else going on, despite the custody battle looming over them, this moment felt like a gift. His daughter had always believed in him, even when he'd stopped believing in himself. The buzz of conversation, the shared excitement, the simple joy of good food and new discoveries, it all washed over him like a warm wave. He looked down at his hands, still calloused from years of manual labor, now covered in marker smudges from writing equations. Someone raised a paper cup in a makeshift toast. "To the future of farming." "To the future," the others echoed, and Ethan joined in quietly, his rare smile growing just a little wider. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Ethan stared at his computer screen, his eyes tired but focused. The lab had become his second home over the past week, and even now, at 9 p.m., the energy was electric. Dr. Chen paced near the whiteboard, reviewing equations, while other team members hunched over their keyboards, racing against time. "How's the conclusion coming along, Ethan?" Dr. Chen asked, pausing his pacing to peer over Ethan's shoulder. Ethan nodded, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Almost there? I'm trying to make it clear how this could change things for drought-stricken regions." He adjusted his reading glasses, a gift from Lily last Father's Day. The words on his screen blurred slightly. He'd been at this for hours. The grant proposal was nearly complete. Sections on methodology, expected outcomes, and budget projections filled dozens of pages. But this conclusion, this was where they needed to shine. This was where they had to make the reviewers feel what was at stake. Dr. Chen pulled up a chair. "Tell me what you're thinking." Ethan leaned back, his janitor's uniform still on beneath his lab coat. "You know, when I clean the cafeteria late at night, I see how much food gets wasted. But then I think about the news reports. Millions of people going hungry because crops won't grow in their soil." He turned to face Dr. Chen. "This isn't just about scientific innovation. It's about feeding people who need it most." Dr. Chen's eyes lit up. "That's exactly the angle we need. Write it exactly like that." Ethan's fingers moved across the keyboard with renewed purpose. He wrote about desert communities transformed into agricultural centers, about children going to school with full stomachs, about hope taking root in barren soil. The words flowed naturally, powered by genuine belief in what their research could achieve. "Hey everyone," called Marcus from across the lab, his earlier hostility forgotten in the rush of deadline pressure. "Who wants coffee? I'm making a final run." Hands shot up around the room. Ethan smiled. Nothing united scientists like caffeine and deadlines. As Marcus collected orders, Dr. Chen assembled the team for one last review. They projected the proposal onto the main screen, scrolling through each section methodically. Ethan's equations glowed on the screen, integrated seamlessly with years of the team's previous research. The crop yield projections look solid, said Jessica, one of the graduate students. The control variables account for temperature fluctuations better than our previous models. They moved through the document, fine-tuning phrases, catching typos, strengthening arguments. Ethan's contribution had evolved from that single equation on the whiteboard into something much more comprehensive. His practical experience with mathematical applications had helped bridge gaps between theory and real-world application. Marcus returned with coffee just as they reached the conclusion section. He distributed the cups, pausing at Ethan's desk. "Here's yours. Black. 2 sugars, right?" Ethan accepted the cup with a grateful nod. The small gesture of Marcus remembering his coffee preference meant more than he'd admit. The team fell silent as they read Ethan's conclusion together. The words carried weight beyond academic language. They painted a picture of possibility, of science serving humanity's most basic needs. "This is," Dr. Chen trailed off, searching for words. "This is exactly what we needed." The clock showed 11:15 p.m. when they began their final proofread. Everyone took sections, reading aloud to catch any last mistakes. Ethan's voice joined the others, steady and confident, so different from the hesitant janitor who'd first entered the lab. At 11:45, Dr. Chen pulled up the submission portal. The team gathered around his computer, shoulders touching, breaths held. Years of research, weeks of intense writing, and countless cups of coffee had led to this moment. "Ready?" Dr. Chen's finger hovered over the mouse. Ethan thought of Lily at home, probably still awake despite his text telling her not to wait up. He thought of Sarah, who would have loved seeing him here, doing what they'd once dreamed of together. He thought of all the people this research could help. "Ready," the team responded in unison. Dr. Chen clicked Submit. The progress bar moved slowly, agonizingly slowly, across the screen. And then, "Submission successful. Thank you for your proposal." The room erupted. High fives flew between team members. Whoops of joy echoed off the lab walls. Dr. Chen grabbed Ethan's hand, shaking it vigorously. "We did it! We actually did it!" Jessica initiated a group high five, making sure everyone connected in a circle of celebration. Even Marcus was grinning, his earlier doubts about Ethan seemingly forgotten in the moment of triumph. The clock struck midnight, but no one was thinking about Cinderella transformations. In this lab, a different kind of magic had happened, the kind born of hard work, collaboration, and the belief that science could make the world a little better. Ethan's eyes burned from staring at the computer screen. He'd been working on the grant proposal's conclusion for hours, surrounded by the sterile white walls of the research lab. The steady hum of equipment and occasional whispers from his fellow researchers had become a familiar backdrop to his new life. A gentle knock on the lab's glass door broke his concentration. When he looked up, his heart warmed at the sight of Lily standing there, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a brown paper bag clutched in her hands. She wore her favorite blue sweater, the one that reminded him so much of her mother. Dr. Chen smiled and waved her in. "Ah, the younger Miss Cole, please come in." Lily entered carefully, mindful of the expensive equipment around her. Her eyes darted around the lab with poorly concealed curiosity, taking in the complex machinery and wall-to-wall whiteboards covered in equations. She made her way to her father's workstation, weaving between the lab benches with careful steps. "I thought you might be hungry," she said, placing the paper bag on his desk. "You forgot your lunch at home." Ethan checked his watch, surprised to find it was already past 2 in the afternoon. "I completely lost track of time, sweetheart." "You always do when you're working on something important," Lily said, a knowing smile playing on her lips. She pulled out a chair and sat next to him, reaching into the bag. "I made your favorite turkey and avocado on sourdough." As she unpacked their lunch, a small envelope fell onto the desk. Ethan picked it up, noting his name written in Lily's neat handwriting on the front. "Open it," she urged, her eyes bright with anticipation. Ethan carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a simple card decorated with hand-drawn mathematical symbols and formulas. Inside, in bold letters, were the words, "You're my hero." His throat tightened as he read the message. Below the main text, Lily had written, "Dad, I'm so proud of who you are and everything you do. Love, Lily, I thought you could use some encouragement, she said softly, noticing how his hands trembled slightly as he held the card. You've been working so hard. One of the younger researchers walked by, glancing at the card. That's really sweet, she said with a genuine smile. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to maintain his composure. Thank you, honey. This means more than you know. Dr. Chen approached their desk, his usual serious expression softened. Ethan, why don't you take a proper lunch break? The formulas will still be here when you get back. Are you sure? Ethan asked, glancing at his unfinished work. Absolutely. Family comes first. Dr. Chen gestured toward the door. There's a nice bench outside in the courtyard. The weather's perfect today. Ethan nodded gratefully and stood up, his joints protesting after sitting for so long. He gathered the lunch items while Lily collected napkins and 2 bottles of water she'd brought. They made their way outside to a wrought iron bench nestled between flowering bushes. The afternoon sun was warm but not uncomfortable, and a light breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. As they settled onto the bench, Ethan unwrapped his sandwich. How was school today? Pretty good, Lily replied, pulling out her own lunch, a peanut butter and banana sandwich. We started a new unit in AP Chemistry. We're studying molecular structures. That was always your mother's favorite topic, Ethan said softly, remembering how Sarah's eyes would light up when discussing chemical bonds. I know, Lily smiled. That's why I was so excited. Mr. Peterson showed us some 3D molecular models, and I couldn't help thinking about Mom's old textbooks in the attic. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment before Lily spoke again. Dad, can I tell you something? Of course, sweetheart. Seeing you work in the lab, it's inspired me. She turned to face him, her expression earnest. I've been thinking about applying to the summer science program at the university. The one for high school students? Ethan's heart swelled with pride. Really? Yeah. I mean, watching you solve problems and work with all these brilliant scientists, it made me realize that's what I want to do too. She picked at the crust of her sandwich. I want to understand how things work, how to make the world better through science, just like you and Mom. Your mother would be so proud of you, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Just like I am. Do you think I could do it? Lily asked, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. The summer program is pretty competitive. Lily, you can do anything you set your mind to. You've got your mother's brilliant mind and determination. He squeezed her shoulder gently. And I'll help you with the application. Thanks, Dad. She leaned her head against his shoulder, just like she used to do when she was little. Maybe someday we'll work in the same lab. I'd like that, Ethan replied, taking another bite of his sandwich. Though you'll probably be running the place by then. Lily laughed, the sound bright and clear in the afternoon air. First, I need to get through high school chemistry. Speaking of which, she pulled out her phone and showed him a complex molecular diagram. Any chance you could help me understand this structure? The morning sun streamed through the lab's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors where Ethan had mopped just hours before. He sat at his newly assigned desk, reviewing some calculations while other team members worked quietly at their stations. The familiar scent of coffee and cleaning supplies mingled in the air. Dr. Chen stood near the whiteboard, her glasses perched on her nose as she studied their latest data. The quiet atmosphere was suddenly broken by the sharp ring of her office phone. Everyone looked up, knowing the grant committee's decision was due any day. She hurried to answer it, her usually composed demeanor showing a hint of nervousness. Dr. Chen speaking, she said, her voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. The lab fell silent. Even the usual hum of equipment seemed muted. Ethan's hands grew clammy as he watched Dr. Chen's expression. Her eyes widened slightly, and then a smile began to spread across her face. Yes, I understand. Thank you. This is wonderful news. She gripped the phone tighter. On behalf of the entire team, we're honored. The younger scientists began to fidget in their seats, hardly daring to breathe. Dr. Chen listened for a few more moments, nodding occasionally, before hanging up the phone. She turned to face the team, maintaining her professional composure for just a moment before breaking into a radiant grin. We got it, she announced. Full funding, every penny we asked for. The lab erupted. Chairs scraped against the floor as people jumped to their feet. Someone let out a whoop of joy that echoed off the walls. Dr. Chen's assistant, Tom, rushed to the small refrigerator where they'd optimistically stored a few bottles of champagne the day before. "I can't believe it!" Sarah, one of the younger researchers, grabbed Ethan's hands and pulled him into an impromptu dance. "We actually did it!" Even the scientists who had initially doubted Ethan's contributions were caught up in the celebration. Professor Matthews, who had been skeptical just weeks ago, clapped him on the back. "Your crop yield calculations made the difference," he admitted, smiling. "Brilliant work." The pop of a champagne cork made everyone jump, then laugh. Plastic cups appeared from somewhere, and the bubbling liquid was passed around. Ethan accepted his cup with trembling hands, still processing the news. Just months ago, he'd been quietly mopping these same floors, never imagining he'd be standing here as part of this team. Dr. Chen tapped her cup with a pen, calling for attention. "I want to make a toast," she said, her eyes bright with emotion. "To every person in this room who contributed to this success. To our brilliant team of researchers who never gave up." She paused, looking directly at Ethan. "And to the unexpected solutions that sometimes come from the most surprising places." "Here, here." The team raised their cups in unison. Ethan took a small sip, remembering how his late wife used to celebrate her own mathematical breakthroughs with a glass of champagne. She would have loved this moment. He could almost hear her laugh, see her proud smile. The celebration continued as people hugged, chatted excitedly about future experiments, and made plans for implementing their research. The grant would fund their work for 3 years, enough time to potentially revolutionize desert agriculture. After about 20 minutes, Dr. Chen gestured for Ethan to join her near her office. He weaved through the celebrating scientists, still clutching his half-full cup. "Ethan," she said warmly, "this success belongs to you as much as anyone else here. More, perhaps, considering your breakthrough sparked everything else." He shook his head modestly. "I just helped connect some dots that were already there." "No." Dr. Chen's tone grew firm. "Don't diminish your contribution. Which is why I want you on stage with us at the International Agricultural Science Conference next month. As a full presenting member of this team." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The conference was one of the most prestigious gatherings in their field. Scientists from around the world would attend. "Dr. Chen, he hesitated. "I'm not sure I'm qualified to—" "You're more than qualified," she interrupted. "Your work speaks for itself. The grant committee specifically mentioned your models in their approval." She smiled knowingly. "Besides, the world needs to see that brilliant minds exist everywhere, not just in ivory towers." Before Ethan could respond, Sarah called out from across the lab. "Dr. Chen, the dean is on the line. He wants to congratulate the team." "Think about it," Dr. Chen said, squeezing his arm gently before heading to her office to take the call. Ethan stood there, watching the continuing celebration around him. Young researchers were taking selfies with their champagne cups. Others were already at the whiteboards, sketching out implementation plans with renewed enthusiasm. The morning sun caught the bubbles in his cup, creating tiny prisms of light. The janitor's closet where he stored his mop and bucket was visible through the lab's glass walls. It struck him then. The distance between that closet and this moment wasn't as far as some might think. Both spaces were part of who he was, and for the first time in years, he felt no shame in either role. Dr. Chen's voice carried from her office as she spoke with the dean, her tone confident and proud as she described their team's achievement. Through the glass, she caught Ethan's eye and gave him an encouraging nod. The champagne bubbles tickled his nose as he took another sip, letting himself fully feel the joy of the moment. The conference invitation lingered in his mind, frightening and exhilarating all at once. Like the equation he'd corrected on that fateful night, it represented another chance to step forward, to show what he was capable of. Around him, the celebration continued, full of laughter and dreams of the future they would build together. His teammates, and he could truly call them that now, were already discussing the experiments they would run with the grant money, the lives they might change with their research. In their eyes, he saw the same hope he'd carried with him all these years, through every long night of cleaning, through every struggle to provide for Lily. The courthouse loomed before Ethan, its stone facade cold and imposing in the early morning light. He adjusted his borrowed tie, a navy blue one. Dr. Chen had insisted he wear for both the hearing and the conference later. His hands trembled slightly as he smoothed down his freshly pressed shirt, purchased specially for this day. Inside, the polished wooden benches felt hard and unyielding beneath him. The courtroom silence was broken only by the shuffle of papers and the occasional whisper. Ethan's lawyer, Sarah Martinez, sat beside him, reviewing their documentation one last time. "Remember," she whispered, "stay calm, no matter what they say. The judge needs to see you as stable and collected." Ethan nodded, his throat too tight for words. He glanced at his watch. In 4 hours, he was supposed to be presenting groundbreaking research at the conference. Now, that seemed impossibly far away. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise. The Honorable Judge William Harrison presiding." As everyone stood, Ethan caught sight of Lily's grandparents for the first time in 15 years. Richard and Margaret Walsh sat ramrod straight, their expensive clothes and perfectly coiffed appearance a stark contrast to his modest attire. They didn't look at him. "Please be seated," Judge Harrison said, his voice carrying authority without harshness. "We're here today regarding the custody petition for Lily Cole, case number 2023 FC 428. The proceedings began with standard formalities. Ethan's leg bounced nervously under the table as the grandparents' lawyer, Mr. Bradford, rose to speak. The man's tailored suit probably cost more than 3 months of Ethan's janitorial salary. "Your Honor," Bradford began, his voice smooth and practiced, "we're here today because Mr. and Mrs. Walsh have serious concerns about their granddaughter's living conditions and her father's ability to provide a stable environment." Ethan's hands clenched into fists under the table. Sarah had warned him this was coming, but hearing it still felt like a punch to the gut. "Mr. Cole works nights as a janitor at Hawthorne University," Bradford continued, pulling out several photographs. "Permission to approach, Your Honor?" The judge nodded, and Bradford presented the first photo. This was taken just last week. Mr. Cole, mopping floors at 2 a.m. while his 16-year-old daughter was home alone. More photos followed. Ethan emptying trash bins, cleaning bathrooms, pushing his cart through hallways. Each image felt like another weight on his shoulders. "Recently," Bradford continued, "Mr. Cole has begun claiming he's some sort of scientific consultant. But let's be clear. He's a janitor who dropped out of college, trying to pretend he's something he's not." "Objection, Your Honor," Sarah interjected. "Counsel is editorializing." "Sustained," Judge Harrison said. "Mr. Bradford, please stick to facts." Bradford nodded smoothly. "The facts are these. Mr. Cole works nights, leaving his minor daughter unsupervised. His income barely covers their basic needs. And now he's engaging in fantasy about being a scientist, showing increasingly unstable behavior." Ethan wanted to stand up, to shout about the grant they'd just won, about the breakthrough they'd made. But Sarah's hand on his arm kept him seated. Richard Walsh took the stand next. His silver hair and expensive glasses projected an image of distinguished authority. "We've been worried about Lily for years," he testified. "But when we heard about this scientific pretense, we knew we had to act. Our granddaughter needs stability, not a father who can't accept his station in life." Ethan's lawyer presented their side. Lily's excellent grades, their modest but well-kept apartment, letters from teachers praising their strong relationship. She even had Dr. Chen's written testimony about Ethan's valuable contributions to their research. But then Margaret Walsh took the stand, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "We just want what's best for our granddaughter," she said, her voice trembling perfectly. How can she focus on her own education when she's worried about her father working all night, when he's filling her head with delusions about being a scientist? The judge asked several questions about Ethan's schedule, his income, his supervision arrangements for Lily. Each answer seemed to hang in the air, inadequate despite their truth. Finally, Judge Harrison cleared his throat. "This is a complex situation," he began, "and the court's primary concern must be the minor child's welfare." Ethan's heart pounded so hard he could barely hear the next words. While Mr. Cole clearly cares for his daughter, the concerns raised about supervision and stability are significant. Therefore, I am granting temporary custody to Mr. and Mrs. Proster. Walsh, pending a full review of Mr. Cole's circumstances. The room spun. Ethan heard Sarah saying something about visitation rights and appeal procedures, but it all seemed distant, unreal. The transfer of custody will take effect immediately, Judge Harrison continued. Mr. Cole will have supervised visitation rights to be arranged through the court. Ethan stumbled to his feet as the judge left the courtroom. Through blurry eyes, he watched Richard Walsh put an arm around Margaret's shoulders, their victory evident in every line of their bodies. We'll appeal, Sarah was saying, gathering her papers. This isn't over, Mr. Cole. But Ethan could barely hear her. His phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Chen asking where he was. The conference was starting. His presentation slides were ready. The audience was waiting. He pushed through the heavy courthouse doors into the morning sunlight. The stone steps where he stood seemed to mock him, as solid and immovable as the judge's decision. Tears rolled down his cheeks as he thought of Lily, of the conference beginning without him, of everything slipping away despite how hard he'd tried. His phone buzzed again, but he couldn't bring himself to look at it. Instead, he sank down onto the courthouse steps, his borrowed tie coming loose, and let the tears fall freely. In the distance, he could hear the university's clock tower chiming the hour, marking the exact moment his presentation should have begun. The key turned in the lock with a hollow click. Ethan pushed open the apartment door, his movements heavy and mechanical. The familiar scent of home, a mix of Lily's strawberry shampoo and the lavender air freshener she loved, hit him like a physical blow. The afternoon sun streamed through the small kitchen window, casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. Everything looked exactly the same as it had this morning, yet completely different. The dishes from breakfast still sat in the drying rack. Lily's favorite blue mug, the one with cartoon scientists on it, perched on top. Ethan's legs felt like lead as he made his way to the kitchen table. His fingers traced the worn wooden surface, lingering on the small dent where Lily had once dropped her science textbook. The empty chair across from him, her chair, stood as a silent accusation. The judge's words echoed in his head. Temporary custody granted to the maternal grandparents, pending further review. He slumped into his seat, his suit jacket, borrowed from the lab's lost and found, feeling too tight across his shoulders. The conference badge still hung around his neck, mocking him with its promise of professional recognition. He should have been standing at a podium right now, presenting their breakthrough research. Instead, he sat alone in his kitchen while his daughter packed her things in her grandparents' car. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. 3:47 p.m. Usually at this time, Lily would be bursting through the door, dropping her backpack by the coat rack, despite his constant reminders to hang it up, and launching into animated stories about her day. The quiet felt wrong, like a physical presence pressing against his ears. His eyes drifted to the refrigerator, covered in Lily's artwork and school achievements. A recent math test with a bright red A+ held pride of place in the center. Below it, a photo of them at the Science Museum last month, both grinning widely as they posed in front of a DNA display. His daughter's eyes sparkled with the same curiosity and intelligence that had drawn him to her mother all those years ago. The grandparents' lawyer's words cut through his memory. Your Honor, Mr. Cole works nights as a janitor. His sudden claims of scientific expertise are questionable at best. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. They'd brought photos, surveillance photos, of him mopping floors, emptying trash bins, cleaning bathrooms. Each image projected onto the courtroom screen had felt like another nail in his coffin. The whispers from the gallery, the pitying looks from the court clerk, the satisfied smirks from his former in-laws, it all blurred together in a fog of humiliation. A janitor pretending to be a scientist, they'd said. As if the two were mutually exclusive, as if honest work somehow made him less capable of understanding complex equations, as if the years he'd spent studying with Sarah, his brilliant mathematician wife, counted for nothing because he carried a mop instead of a briefcase. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too empty. Lily's science fair ribbons hung on the wall like bright wounds. Her half-finished bowl of cereal from breakfast still sat in the sink. She'd been too nervous about the hearing to eat much. He should wash it, he thought distantly. He should do something, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from replaying the morning's events. But he couldn't move. The empty chair across from him held him transfixed. How many meals had they shared there? How many homework sessions, with Lily's textbooks spread across the table while he helped her work through complex problems? How many late-night hot chocolates when she couldn't sleep, missing her mom? The silence was broken by the buzz of his phone. A text from Lily. At grandparents' house now. Room is weird. Miss you already, Dad. Gadio Aseagr. His vision blurred as he tried to type a response. What could he say? That he was sorry? That he'd fix this somehow? That he'd failed her by not being enough, not educated enough, not wealthy enough, not proper enough in her grandparents' eyes? Before he could reply, a firm knock echoed through the apartment. Ethan wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, not wanting whoever it was to see him like this. The knock came again, more insistent. Coming, he called out, his voice rough. He pushed himself up from the table, legs unsteady. The few steps to the door felt like miles. When he opened it, Dr. Chen stood in the hallway, still wearing her conference clothes. Her usual calm demeanor was replaced by fierce determination. We're not letting this happen, she declared, stepping forward without waiting for an invitation. The fluorescent lights of the lab buzzed overhead as Dr. Chen spread papers across the conference table. Dark circles under his eyes matched Ethan's, evidence of a sleepless night. Around the table sat 6 other scientists, their coffee cups forming a scattered barrier against exhaustion. We've got 2 weeks until the next hearing, Dr. Chen said, shuffling through a stack of documents. That's 2 weeks to prove what we all know, that Ethan belongs here, and more importantly, that he belongs with his daughter. Sarah, one of the younger researchers who had first discovered Ethan's equation on the whiteboard, raised her hand. I've already written my testimony about that night. About how his insight solved a problem we'd been stuck on for months. Ethan sat quietly, his hands wrapped around a cold cup of coffee. The lab coat they'd given him last week hung on the back of his chair. He hadn't felt right wearing it today. His mind kept drifting to Lily, wondering if she'd slept at all in her grandparents' house. Dr. Chen's voice cut through his thoughts. I've contacted the department heads from when your wife was teaching here, Ethan. They remember both of you. The mention of Marie made Ethan's throat tight. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Actually, a voice called from the doorway, we've already started getting responses. Everyone turned to see Jessica, the lab administrator, walking in with a thick manila envelope. These just came through the internal mail system. Letters from former students and colleagues of Dr. Marie Cole. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as Dr. Chen opened the envelope. The first letter was written on crisp department letterhead. Marie Cole wasn't just brilliant, Dr. Chen read aloud. She was a born teacher, and no one learned more from her than her husband, Ethan. I watched them work through complex theoretical problems together during her office hours. Their collaboration was remarkable. He looked up. This is from Dr. Harrison, the former head of applied mathematics. Sarah began taking notes on her laptop. This is perfect for the hearing. It shows a history of academic involvement. More letters emerged from the envelope. A former graduate student wrote about how Marie and Ethan had helped her through a particularly difficult thesis problem. Another remembered them working side by side in the university library, surrounded by papers covered in equations. Here's something, Jessica said, scanning another letter. This one mentions specific theorems you worked on together, Ethan. The writer says your understanding of practical applications often helped clarify Marie's more abstract approaches. The knot in Ethan's chest began to loosen slightly. He remembered those days, the excitement of discovery, the joy of understanding clicking into place. Marie had always said he saw patterns others missed. Dr. Chen started organizing the letters into categories. We'll need to present these systematically. Show how your mathematical background directly contributed to our current breakthrough. The grant proposal, another scientist added. We should emphasize Ethan's role in that. The reviewers specifically praised the practical implementation section, the part he wrote. The lab hummed with activity as everyone found tasks to help. Some drafted statements about Ethan's recent contributions. Others gathered data from their successful experiments. Sarah created a timeline showing the project's progress before and after his involvement. Around noon, Jessica returned with another delivery, this one containing emails from current faculty members. Professor Randall's earlier dismissal had sparked a backlash, with several senior professors writing to support Ethan's position in the lab. "Listen to this," Dr. Chen said, reading from his computer. "The distinction between janitor and scientist is artificial. Some of history's greatest breakthroughs came from people working outside traditional academic roles. What matters is the quality of thought, not the title on an ID badge." Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest as he watched his colleagues work. These people who barely knew him 2 weeks ago were now fighting for his family with everything they had. A gentle hand touched his shoulder. It was Martha, the senior lab technician who had been quietly supportive since his first day. "We're going to need you to talk about Marie," she said softly. "About what you learned from her, how you kept studying, even after she was gone. The judge needs to understand this isn't some fluke. This knowledge has always been part of you." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "I've spent 10 years avoiding those memories," he admitted. "It hurt too much to think about the life we planned together. But look what those memories helped you create." Martha gestured to the lab equipment, the chart showing successful crop growth in simulated harsh conditions. "You're building something that could help feed millions. Marie would be so proud." As the afternoon wore on, the evidence mounted. Documentation of Ethan's contributions, letters of support, detailed explanations of how his mathematical insights had advanced their research. The pile of papers grew until it told a story, not of a janitor pretending to be something he wasn't, but of a man whose circumstances had hidden his abilities until now. "I think," Dr. Chen said, reviewing their progress, "we have something solid here. Something that shows exactly who you are, Ethan." For the first time since the devastating hearing, Ethan felt a spark of real hope. He looked at the papers spread across the table, proof of his knowledge, his capabilities, his worth. Proof that he could provide his daughter with more than just a clean floor to walk on. He picked up his lab coat and put it on. It felt right this time. The courthouse's oak-paneled walls seemed to press in around them as Ethan sat rigid in his chair. His collar felt too tight, and his palms were sweaty despite the room's cool air conditioning. The judge's bench loomed before them like a mountain, while afternoon sunlight filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Lily stood as her name was called, her navy blue dress carefully pressed for the occasion. She'd insisted on wearing it, the same one she'd worn to her middle school graduation last year. Her dark hair was pulled back with the butterfly clip her mother had given her on her 10th birthday. Though her hands trembled slightly, her chin was held high. "Please state your name for the record," the court clerk said, adjusting her glasses. "Lily Marie Cole." Her voice came out clear and steady, surprising even herself. The judge, an older woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, leaned forward slightly. "Lily, do you understand why you're here today?" "Yes, Your Honor. My grandparents want custody of me because they think my dad isn't." She paused, swallowing hard. "They think he isn't good enough to raise me." Ethan's heart clenched. From the corner of his eye, he could see his former in-laws sitting straight-backed and proper, their expressions carefully neutral. They looked exactly as they had 15 years ago, when they'd cut off all contact after his wife's death. "And what do you think about that?" the judge asked gently. Lily's hands clasped together in front of her, a gesture so like her mother's that it made Ethan's chest ache. "I think they're wrong. They're so wrong it makes me angry." A soft murmur rippled through the courtroom. Dr. Chen, sitting behind Ethan with several other scientists from the lab, nodded encouragingly. "Could you explain why you feel that way?" The judge's voice remained neutral, but her eyes were focused intently on Lily. "My grandparents." Lily's voice wavered for the first time. She took a deep breath and started again. "My grandparents think being a janitor means my dad isn't smart enough or good enough to take care of me. They showed those pictures of him mopping floors like it was something to be ashamed of." She turned slightly, looking directly at her grandparents. "But they don't know him. They haven't been there for the last 15 years. They weren't there when he read me bedtime stories every night, even after working 2 shifts. They weren't there when he helped me with my science projects, or when he taught me algebra at the kitchen table." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "They weren't there when I had the flu last winter, and he stayed up for 3 nights straight to take care of me. They don't know how he keeps every single one of my report cards in a special folder, or how he never misses a parent-teacher conference, even if it means losing hours at work. The courtroom was silent now, every eye fixed on the teenage girl whose voice grew stronger with each word. And they definitely don't know about all the times I've found him studying math books late at night, after his shift, just because he loves learning. They don't know how he kept all of Mom's old textbooks, or how he still works through her problems sometimes, just to feel close to her. Ethan felt tears sliding down his cheeks, but he didn't move to wipe them away. His daughter stood tall, her words filling the courtroom with a truth he'd never been able to express himself. I don't care if my dad cleans floors or solves equations, and now he does both. He's the smartest, kindest man I know. He taught me that no honest work is beneath anyone, and that real intelligence isn't about degrees or job titles. It's about how you treat people and how hard you're willing to work for what matters. Lily's voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. My grandparents think having money and status makes them better parents, but they're wrong. My dad might not have a fancy house or expensive clothes, but he has something better. He has love and dedication and integrity. He never gave up on me, even when things were really hard. He never stopped trying to make my life better. She turned to face the judge directly. Your Honor, my mom used to say that true character shows in how you handle life's hardest moments. My dad has shown his character every single day since she died. He's not just good enough to raise me, he's the only person I want to raise me. He's my hero. The last word hung in the air like a bell tone. No one moved. No one spoke. The afternoon sunlight caught the tears on Lily's cheeks, making them shimmer like tiny stars. The courtroom fell silent. Through the thick silence, Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his daughter's words settling over the room like a blanket. Dr. Chen's hand rested supportively on his shoulder, and somewhere in the gallery, someone sniffled quietly. The judge's expression remained carefully neutral, but her eyes had softened as she watched Lily stand her ground, this young girl who had just laid bare her heart in defense of her father. In that moment of complete stillness, with sunlight streaming through the high windows and his daughter's words still echoing in his ears, Ethan realized that regardless of what happened next, Lily had given him the greatest gift possible. She had seen him, truly seen him, and found him worthy. She had taken all his years of quiet struggle, all his attempts to be both mother and father, all his late nights and early mornings, and woven them into a testament of love that no one in the courtroom could deny. The silence stretched on, heavy with the weight of truth spoken from a daughter's heart. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Dr. Chen approached the witness stand. Her normally casual lab attire had been swapped for a crisp charcoal suit, and she carried a leather portfolio stuffed with papers. Ethan noticed how she held her head high, exhibiting the same quiet confidence she showed when presenting at scientific conferences. Please state your name and credentials for the record, the court clerk requested. Dr. Mei Chen, Ph.D. I'm the lead researcher and project director for the Quantum Agriculture Initiative at Hawthorne University. Her voice was clear and steady, carrying easily through the hushed courtroom. Ethan's lawyer, Sarah Martinez, stepped forward. Dr. Chen, could you explain your relationship with Mr. Cole? Ethan Cole began as our building's night janitor, but he is now an essential member of our research team. Dr. Chen opened her portfolio. What started as a simple equation correction has evolved into groundbreaking contributions to our project. From his seat, Ethan could see his in-laws' faces tighten with displeasure. Their lawyer shifted in his chair, preparing his objections. Could you elaborate on Mr. Cole's specific contributions? Sarah asked. Dr. Chen nodded, pulling out a series of charts. May I approach the bench, Your Honor? At the judge's nod, she handed copies to the court clerk for distribution. These graphs show our project's progress over the past 5 years. The red line indicates where we were stuck. She pointed to a plateau in the data. And this sharp upturn? That's the day Mr. Cole provided his initial insight. The judge studied the charts with interest, her reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. And you can verify these results? Absolutely, Your Honor. We've had 3 independent labs confirm our findings. Dr. Chen produced more documentation. Mr. Cole's mathematical model for crop yield optimization is now the cornerstone of our research. It's why we won the Henderson Grant, a $2.5 million award. Ethan's in-law's lawyer stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. This seems irrelevant to the custody matter at hand." "Your Honor," Sarah countered, "this goes directly to Mr. Cole's ability to provide for his daughter. Dr. Chen is establishing his value to the project and his earning potential." "Overruled," the judge stated firmly. "Please continue, Dr. Chen." Dr. Chen pulled out a contract. "This is the university's formal offer to Mr. Cole. In addition to his consulting fees, which have already totaled $45,000 over the past 3 months, we're offering him a permanent position as Senior Research Associate with an annual salary of $85,000 plus benefits." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Ethan caught Lily's eye from where she sat with her court-appointed guardian. She gave him a small, proud smile. "And this position," Sarah clarified, "would allow Mr. Cole to work regular daytime hours?" "Yes," Dr. Chen confirmed. 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. We've already hired a replacement for his janitorial position, though I must say the floors aren't quite as spotless anymore." This earned a few gentle chuckles from the gallery. The in-law's lawyer stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Chen, isn't it unusual for someone without formal credentials to hold such a position?" Dr. Chen's expression remained pleasant but firm. "Science isn't about credentials, counselor. It's about results. Mr. Cole's work speaks for itself." She pulled out another document. "This is a letter from the Henderson Grant Committee, specifically praising the innovative approach Mr. Cole brought to the project." "But surely," the lawyer pressed, "someone who spent years mopping floors can't suddenly—" "Objection!" Sarah called out. "Argumentative." "Sustained," the judge said sharply, giving the opposing lawyer a stern look. Dr. Chen spoke up before another question could be asked. "If I may, Your Honor?" At the judge's nod, she continued. "Mr. Cole's late wife was Dr. Catherine Cole, a brilliant mathematician. They studied together for years. What we're seeing isn't sudden brilliance, it's knowledge finally finding its outlet." Ethan felt his throat tighten at the mention of Catherine. He remembered their late-night study sessions, how she'd help him understand complex concepts while they shared cheap takeout in their tiny apartment. "Furthermore," Dr. Chen added, pulling out one final document, "we've just been notified that our paper, with Mr. Cole as second author, has been accepted for publication in the Journal of Agricultural Innovation. This is one of the most prestigious publications in our field." The judge examined all the documents carefully, while both lawyers completed their questioning. Finally, she looked up, removing her glasses. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. You may step down." She glanced at her watch. "Given the extensive testimony we've heard today, I'll need time to review everything properly. I'll announce my decision tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The bailiff called out, "All rise," as the judge stood to leave. Ethan got to his feet, his legs slightly shaky. Through the crowd of people filing out of the courtroom, he caught glimpses of Lily being led away by her guardian, of his in-laws huddled with their lawyer, of Dr. Chen carefully repacking her portfolio. Sarah touched his arm gently. "You did well today, Ethan. Try to get some rest tonight." But they both knew rest would be hard to come by, with tomorrow's decision looming over everything like a storm cloud ready to break. The digital clock on Ethan's microwave blinked 3:47 a.m., its green numbers casting a soft glow across his small kitchen. He hadn't even tried going to bed. His footsteps traced familiar paths across the worn linoleum floor as he paced back and forth, his mind racing with every possible outcome of tomorrow's decision. The apartment felt eerily quiet without Lily's presence. No soft snoring from her room, no occasional creak of her bed as she turned in her sleep. Just silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and his own restless movements. Ethan's coffee mug sat empty on the counter, long since gone cold. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, but sleep remained impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lily's face, heard her brave testimony in court. "He's the smartest, kindest man I know." Her words echoed in his mind, a lifeline he clung to in the darkness. At 4:30, he couldn't take the confines of the apartment anymore. Grabbing his jacket, he headed out into the pre-dawn stillness. The air was crisp, carrying the first hints of autumn. Street lamps cast pools of yellow light on empty sidewalks as his feet carried him toward campus. The security guard at the university gate nodded in recognition. He'd seen Ethan coming and going at odd hours enough times over the years. "Early start today, Mr. Cole?" "Couldn't sleep, Frank." Ethan managed a weak smile. "Just going to walk around a bit." "Good luck today," Frank called after him. Word had gotten around about the custody battle, and the simple kindness in the guard's voice made Ethan's throat tighten. He wandered past darkened buildings until he reached the research complex. The greenhouse dome rose before him, its glass panels reflecting the first pale hints of dawn. Inside, rows of experimental crops grew under carefully controlled conditions, the fruits of their team's research finally taking physical form. Using his newly issued key card, Ethan let himself in. The humidity wrapped around him like a warm blanket as he walked between the rows of plants. These weren't just any crops. They were growing in soil conditions that simulated the harshest deserts, using the quantum agriculture techniques he'd helped develop. Tomato plants stretched toward the grow lights, their fruits still small but promising. Wheat stalks swayed gently in the circulated air. In one corner, corn was thriving in what should have been impossible conditions. He reached out to touch a leaf, remembering late nights spent refining equations, arguing over variables, celebrating breakthroughs. "Your mother would love this," he whispered, thinking of Maria. She had always believed in the practical applications of pure mathematics in using complex theories to solve real-world problems. How many times had they sat at their kitchen table, her explaining concepts while he absorbed every word? The memory of those nights felt so vivid. Maria's dark eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, her hands moving expressively as she talked. The way she'd pull her hair back when diving into particularly complicated explanations. She'd never cared that he was just a maintenance worker when they met. She'd seen past that, seen his hunger to learn, his ability to grasp complex concepts. Light began streaming through the greenhouse panels as sunrise approached. Ethan checked his watch. 6:15 a.m. The courthouse wouldn't open for hours yet. He walked slowly between the rows, inspecting plants, checking soil moisture levels, anything to keep his hands and mind occupied. Near the back of the greenhouse, a new batch of seedlings was just breaking through the soil. Tiny green shoots reaching upward, defying the hostile growing medium they'd been planted in. Ethan knelt down to examine them more closely. These were part of the latest trial, using his most recent refinements to the growth formulas. "You're going to make it?" he murmured to the seedlings. "Nobody believed you could grow here, but you're proving them wrong." He wasn't sure if he was really talking to the plants anymore. The greenhouse door opened, and Dr. Chen walked in, carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. She didn't seem surprised to find him there. "I thought you might be here," she said, holding out one of the cups. "You look like you haven't slept." "Thanks." He accepted the coffee gratefully. "I couldn't stay home just waiting." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "The plants are doing well. Your latest adjustments to the mineral absorption rates are showing promising results." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunrise paint the greenhouse in golden light. Dr. Chen had become more than just a colleague over these past months. She'd become a friend, an ally in both his scientific work and personal battles. "Whatever happens today," she said finally, "you've proven yourself. To the scientific community, to your daughter, to yourself. Nobody can take that away from you." Ethan took a long sip of coffee, letting its warmth spread through his tired body. "I just want to be worthy of her faith in me. Lily's, I mean." "You already are." Dr. Chen checked her watch. "The courthouse opens in 2 hours. Why don't you help me check the pH levels in the new seedlings? It'll help pass the time." They worked methodically through the morning, recording data, adjusting nutrient levels, discussing future modifications to their growing methods. The familiar routine of scientific work helped calm Ethan's nerves, gave him something to focus on besides the ticking clock. At 8:45, they finished their rounds. Ethan stood at the greenhouse entrance, looking back at their thriving experiments. Each plant represented hours of work, countless calculations, and the kind of persistence that came from believing in something bigger than yourself. The morning sun now streamed fully through the glass panels, creating rainbow refractions that danced across the leaves and stems. It was going to be a beautiful day, the kind that usually lifted his spirits. Today, though, everything hinged on a judge's decision. Ethan's phone buzzed in his pocket, the vibration seeming to travel straight to his racing heart. The courthouse number flashed on the screen. With trembling fingers, he answered the call. The courthouse loomed before Ethan, its stone steps already warming in the early morning sun. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie, the same one Lily had given him for Father's Day 2 years ago, dark blue with tiny silver stars. Dr. Chen and several members of the research team stood nearby, a quiet show of support in their pressed shirts and formal attire. "You've got this, Ethan," Dr. Chen whispered, giving his shoulder a gentle squeeze. Inside the courtroom, the polished wooden benches felt hard and unyielding beneath him. Ethan's gaze drifted to where Lily's grandparents sat with their lawyer, their faces set in stern lines. They hadn't even looked his way when he entered. The bailiff's voice rang out. "All rise! The Honorable Judge Sandra Martinez presiding." Judge Martinez settled into her chair, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose as she reviewed the papers before her. The silence in the courtroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. "In the matter of custody regarding minor child, Lily Cole," Judge Martinez began, her voice clear and measured, "this court has carefully considered all testimony and evidence presented." Ethan's fingers gripped the edge of the table. He felt Dr. Chen shift slightly beside him, the rustle of his colleague's suit jacket barely audible in the hushed courtroom. "The purpose of this court is to determine what arrangement best serves the child's interests," the judge continued. "We have heard compelling testimony from multiple parties, including Ms. Cole herself." She paused, looking directly at Ethan. "Mr. Cole, would you please stand?" Ethan rose on shaky legs, his attorney's hand giving his arm a reassuring pat. "Mr. Cole, this court has observed something remarkable over the course of these proceedings. We've seen a father who, despite facing significant challenges, has consistently put his daughter's well-being first. You've maintained steady employment, not 1, but 2 jobs now, while creating a loving, stable home environment." Ethan blinked rapidly, fighting back tears as Judge Martinez continued. "Your dedication to education, both your daughter's and your own ongoing intellectual pursuits, is commendable. The testimony from Dr. www.com. Chen and your colleagues at Hawthorne University speaks volumes about your character and capabilities." She turned her attention to the other side of the courtroom. "While the petitioners, Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, expressed genuine concern for their granddaughter's welfare, they have failed to demonstrate that the current living situation is in any way detrimental to Lily's development. In fact, all evidence suggests the opposite." The judge removed her glasses, her expression softening slightly. "Mr. Cole, your late wife would be proud of the father you've become. This court sees a man who has faced adversity with grace and determination, who has modeled resilience and dignity for his daughter, and who has created an environment where she can thrive." Ethan's vision blurred with tears he could no longer hold back. Dr. Chen pressed a tissue into his hand. "Therefore, it is the decision of this court to restore full custody to Ethan Cole with no restrictions." Judge Martinez's gavel struck with finality. "The temporary custody order is hereby dissolved." A sob escaped Ethan's throat as his legs nearly gave out. Dr. Chen caught his elbow, steadying him as the judge continued with her closing remarks. "Furthermore, this court strongly encourages the grandparents to work toward reconciliation and to support the remarkable bond between father and daughter. Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, your granddaughter is fortunate to have a father who has devoted his life to her well-being. I hope you can come to recognize and respect that." The courtroom doors burst open, and Ethan turned to see Lily standing there, her school backpack still slung over one shoulder. She must have come straight from her morning classes. Their eyes met across the room, and time seemed to stop. "Dad!" Lily's voice cracked as she ran forward, tears already streaming down her face. Her feet barely touched the ground as she sprinted down the aisle. Ethan opened his arms just as Lily crashed into him, her tears soaking into his shirt collar. He lifted her off her feet, holding her close as his own tears fell freely. Her familiar weight in his arms felt like coming home, like every missing piece sliding back into place. "I knew it," Lily whispered fiercely between sobs. "I knew you wouldn't lose me." Ethan could only hold her tighter, his heart too full for words. Around them, the research team broke into spontaneous applause, joined by others in the courtroom. But Ethan barely heard it. In that moment, his entire world had narrowed to the feeling of his daughter in his arms, safe and secure where she belonged. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly on the sprawling greenhouse complex, its glass panels gleaming like diamonds in the morning light. Ethan Cole adjusted his collar, no longer wearing his familiar janitor's uniform, but instead dressed in a crisp blue button-down shirt with the university's research department logo. Beside him, Lily beamed with pride, her hand tucked in the crook of his arm. "Ready, Dad?" she asked, squeezing his arm gently. Ethan nodded, taking in the sight before them. The massive structure stretched across what had once been barren desert, its climate-controlled interior now home to rows upon rows of thriving crops. His equations, the ones he'd first scribbled on that fateful whiteboard, had helped make this possible. Reporters and photographers clustered near the entrance, their cameras already clicking away. Dr. Chen stood at the podium, preparing to address the gathered crowd of scientists, investors, and media representatives. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Chen began, her voice clear and confident. "Welcome to the Future Foods Initiative's first quantum agriculture facility." Ethan listened as she explained the basics of their breakthrough, his mind drifting back to those long nights in the lab, the custody battles, and the unwavering support of his colleagues. Now, months later, everything had changed. He had a permanent position with the research team, and Lily was thriving in school, more inspired than ever to pursue her own dreams in science. "And now," Dr. Chen continued, "I'd like to introduce one of our key team members, the man whose revolutionary approach to crop yield optimization made this possible, Mr. Ethan Cole." The applause caught him off guard. Lily gave him a gentle push forward, and he made his way to the podium. Looking out at the sea of faces, he remembered how it felt to be invisible, just the man with the mop and bucket. Now they were all waiting to hear him speak. "Thank you," he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. "What you're about to see inside isn't just about mathematical formulas or quantum mechanics. It's about hope. Hope for regions where traditional farming isn't possible. Hope for communities struggling with food security." As he spoke, he caught Lily's eye in the crowd. She wore her mother's old scarf, the one with the mathematical equations printed on it, and her smile gave him strength. The doors to the greenhouse opened, and the crowd gasped collectively. Inside, the air was humid but not oppressive, carefully regulated by systems partially guided by Ethan's calculations. Rows of tomato plants stretched toward the ceiling, their vines heavy with ripe red fruit. Corn stalks stood tall and proud, their leaves a healthy, deep green despite growing in what had once been lifeless desert soil. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing. "Mr. Cole, how does it feel to go from janitor to leading scientist?" one called out. Ethan paused, considering his answer carefully. "I never stopped learning," he said finally. "Whether I was holding a mop or a marker, I kept my mind open to possibilities. My late wife taught me that mathematics is everywhere, in the sweep of a cleaning brush, in the growth pattern of a plant, in the way light bends through glass." More questions followed as they toured the facility. Ethan explained the basic principles behind their success, how they'd managed to alter the soil's molecular structure to improve water retention and nutrient absorption. He used simple terms, just as he did when explaining homework to Lily, making complex concepts accessible to everyone. They passed through sections dedicated to different crops, leafy greens, root vegetables, even fruit trees that shouldn't have been able to survive in such an environment. Each success story represented countless hours of work, failures, and persistence. Dr. Chen pointed out the automated systems that monitored every aspect of the environment: temperature, humidity, soil composition. Each adjustment is based on Mr. Cole's original equations, she explained to the group. "We've essentially created an artificial ecosystem that can be replicated anywhere in the world." Lily wandered slightly ahead of the group, her fingers trailing along the leaves of nearby plants. Ethan watched her pause at a section of strawberry plants, their fruit hanging like tiny red jewels. She'd spent many evenings here with him during the testing phase, doing her homework while he worked, asking questions that often led to new insights. The reporters were particularly interested in the soil enhancement system. Ethan demonstrated how their quantum agriculture technique had transformed the desert sand into fertile growing medium. "It's not magic," he explained, letting the dark soil run through his fingers. "It's mathematics and science, working together to solve a problem that's affected humanity for centuries." As the tour continued, Ethan noticed Lily standing in a shaft of sunlight that streamed through the greenhouse panels. She was looking up at the towering corn stalks, her expression full of wonder. The sight reminded him so much of her mother, the same curiosity, the same joy in discovery. "This is really happening, isn't it, Dad?" she said as he approached. "All those nights you spent working on this, it wasn't just numbers on a page anymore." "No, it wasn't," he agreed, putting an arm around her shoulders. "Your mom used to say that mathematics was the language of the universe. She'd love seeing how we've used it to make things grow." They walked together through the rows of flourishing plants while the reporters continued taking photos. The air was rich with the smell of earth and growing things, so different from the harsh desert just outside the greenhouse walls. Monitors beeped softly, tracking the countless variables that kept this artificial ecosystem in perfect balance. Lily stopped at a display showing real-time data from the soil sensors. Her eyes moved quickly over the numbers, and Ethan could see her making connections, understanding the principles at work. She'd inherited both her parents' love of mathematics, but more importantly, she'd learned to see beyond the surface of things, to look for the elegant equations that govern the natural world. "It's like a symphony," she said softly, watching the numbers change on the screen. "Everything working together in perfect harmony." Ethan squeezed her shoulder, knowing exactly what she meant. Around them, the impossible had become reality. Crops flourishing in the desert, technology and nature dancing together to create something beautiful. Lily's eyes were wide with awe as she took in the full scope of what they'd achieved, and in her expression, Ethan saw the future, bright, hopeful, and full of possibilities. The Arizona sun filtered through the greenhouse panels, casting a gentle glow over the lush rows of vegetables and grains that seemed to defy the harsh desert outside. Ethan Cole stood in the central aisle, surrounded by the fruits of his research. Tomato vines heavy with ripening fruit, stalks of wheat swaying in the climate-controlled breeze, and leafy greens that would have withered instantly in the scorching heat beyond these walls. Lily walked beside him, running her fingers along the leaves of a thriving corn plant. Her eyes sparkled with wonder as she took in the impossible garden they'd created in the middle of nowhere. The automated sprinkler system misted the air, creating tiny rainbows that danced between the rows. "It's like magic," Lily whispered, careful not to disturb the peaceful atmosphere. Ethan smiled, reaching out to touch a perfectly formed tomato. "Your mother would have seen it differently. She always said there's no such thing as magic, just mathematics we haven't understood yet." The mention of her mother made Lily turn to face him. "Tell me again how you figured it out, Dad. The formula that made all this possible." Ethan led her to a small bench, positioned between rows of peppers and eggplants. The familiar scent of damp earth and growing things surrounded them as they sat. He pulled out a worn notebook from his back pocket, its pages dog-eared and filled with equations in his careful handwriting. "See this variable here?" He pointed to a series of numbers and symbols. "This was the key. Your mother taught me about it years ago when she was working on her thesis. She was studying patterns in nature, the way plants grow, how they adapt to stress." Lily leaned closer, her finger tracing the equations she couldn't quite understand yet. "But how did you remember it after all this time?" Ethan's eyes grew distant with memory. "Your mother had this way of explaining complex things. She'd say, 'Ethan, imagine you're the plant. What would you need to survive?' She taught me to see mathematics as a living thing, not just numbers on a page." He gestured to the thriving crops around them. "When I saw those scientists struggling with their quantum agriculture formulas that night, something clicked. I remembered your mother explaining how plants respond to environmental stress, not just as individual organisms, but as part of a larger system." A butterfly fluttered past, landing on a nearby tomato plant. Lily watched it, transfixed. So, you combined Mom's theory with their quantum approach? Exactly. Ethan's voice filled with quiet pride. Your mother's work was about understanding the fundamental patterns of life. The quantum agriculture team was trying to manipulate those patterns. All I did was bridge the gap between the two ideas. They walked down another aisle, where researchers in white coats were carefully measuring and recording data from experimental wheat varieties. The scientists nodded respectfully as Ethan passed. No one saw him as just a janitor anymore. The really brilliant part was your mother's insight about adaptation rates, Ethan continued, stopping to examine a particularly robust plant. She theorized that every living thing has an optimal path to survival, if you can just figure out the right conditions. These plants aren't fighting against the desert anymore. They're working with it. Lily touched one of the wheat stalks gently, like how you kept working as a janitor all those years, but never stopped learning? Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. I suppose so. Your mother always said that knowledge finds its own way to grow. Just like these plants. Sometimes it just needs the right moment to bloom. They reached a section where new seedlings were just breaking through the soil. Ethan knelt down, showing Lily how the tiny shoots were already stronger than their conventional counterparts. The morning light streamed through the glass panels above them, illuminating father and daughter as they examined the miracle of new life emerging from the earth. You know what Mom used to say about moments like this? Lily asked softly. She'd say that science is just another way of showing how beautiful the world is. Ethan nodded, remembering his wife's passionate explanations at their kitchen table, her eyes bright with excitement as she shared her discoveries. She never saw boundaries between things, art, science, nature. It was all connected in her mind. The sprinkler cycled on again, creating a fine mist that caught the sunlight. Lily watched the tiny rainbows form and dissolve. Mom would be proud, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan put his arm around his daughter's shoulders, holding her close as they looked out over the rows of thriving plants. Everything they'd been through, the custody battle, the late nights, the doubts and fears, had led to this moment. Their research would help feed people in parts of the world where crops had never grown before. Together, they walked toward the greenhouse exit. Ethan held the door open, and they stepped out into the warm desert air, holding hands, the future bright before them. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you thought this was just the beginning, you're right. Click through and see where the story takes you next. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.